Hello class and welcome to another fun, exciting video lesson. Today we'll be looking at sections 3, 2, and 3, adding and subtracting fractions and mixed numbers. Let's just jump right in. First, we're going to take a look at adding fractions. We have two examples right here. Please copy them down. Remember, you can pause the video if you need to. All right. So this first one, we already have common denominators, which is a very important thing because you cannot add or subtract fractions without a common denominator. So they're already common, so we're good to go. We just add the top numbers. We get a 4. The bottom number, we do not combine. It stays the same. So we have 4 eighths. 4 eighths. But we don't leave it like that because even though this answer is correct, it's not complete. We need to simplify it. On all of your answers in this stuff, you will have to simplify the fractions completely. So here you will get 1/2. All right, we get 1/2. Yeehaw! The next fraction will take a little bit of work because we need to find a common denominator. And if you struggled before finding common denominators, you need to find some practice online. Just Google, adding fractions or, finding common denominators or, just changing fractions. You really need to work on that. So if I have a fraction like this and this, a common denominator for them is going to be 20. Okay? Because you're looking at a multiple. What you're looking for is a multiple of 5 and 4 that they both can go into. And it happens to be 20 for this one. So we have 20. I put my fraction there, plus, I have my 20 here. We're not going to add the 20s, we're going to add what's on top. Now do not copy down a 1 and a 3 because that's not what you put there. You've got to learn to ask yourself these questions. There's no magic formula. There's no magic way of looking at it. You've just got to learn this. I don't care if you just say it 20 times. You've got to learn that you ask yourself, what did I multiply 5 by to get 20? Well, I multiplied it by 4. So you do the same to the top. So 1 times 4 is 4. What did I multiply 4 by to get 20? 5. Multiply the top by 5. You get 15. So when you add these, you end up with 19 over 20 as your final answer. Okay? And they have nothing in common, no factors that they have in common, so we can't reduce it any more than that. Okay. Now let's take a look at subtracting. It works in a very similar way. Once again, you must have a common denominator. Once again, our first two examples have common denominators. Our second examples do not. Let's take a look at these. So, already have a common denominator. 13 minus 7 is how you would read this. So what you would end up with is, well, what would it be? It would be a total of, you would get 6 on the top, and the bottom stays 16. Can this reduce? It can. 2 goes into both of them. 3 over 8. That is what you should get right there. Okay? So that is the final answer for 2A. All right, over here, we cannot go and subtract because no common denominator. Nor can we say, oh, it's too difficult, I don't get it, I'm going to give up. You don't get to do that either. You find a common denominator. In this case, it would be 30. So we have 30. 30 is our common denominator. We're subtracting. The question is, what did I multiply 5 by to get 30? I multiplied it by 6. Do the same to the top. Multiply it by 6. You would end up with, what? 18. What did you multiply this by to get 30? You multiplied it by 5. Same to the top. You end up with 5. You subtract. You end up with 13 over 30. Can it reduce? Can it simplify any more than it already is? Nope. They have no factors in common for us to reduce by. There you go. There's your answer. Enough with these basic fractions. Let's move on to something a little more challenging. Let's move on to mixed numbers. First, we'll take a look at adding. Adding, I think, is very simple. You will have to remember a few things with mixed numbers, and I'm going to show you in this first one kind of a tricky thing to remember. But a really good rule of thumb is that what you do is you just add the whole numbers, and then you add the fractions together, okay? So we're actually allowed to add the whole numbers together and then add the fractions together. And we'll have to check something at the end, but we'll get to that in just a minute. So add these two together and you end up with what? You get 6, and our fraction is what? Our fraction is 4 over 3. 2 plus 2, 4. Don't add the denominators, so you got 6 and 4/3. We have a slight problem. This is a mixed number that contains an improper fraction because the numerator is bigger than the denominator. We can't leave it like this. It's not allowed. So what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to convert this improper fraction to a proper fraction. So what we're going to do is we're going to put a 6 right here, okay? And we're going to say plus, okay? And then we're going to write this as a mixed number, okay? So change this to a mixed number and you end up with 1 and 1/3. You should remember how to do this. We did this in the last chapter, okay? We did that part right there, going from that to that. We did that in the last chapter, so you better remember. Well, now I need to combine this again. So my final answer should end up with 7 and 1/3. Awesome, okay? Let's move on to the next example. We have these. Remember, you're allowed to add them together. So 3 plus 8, you end up with what? 11, okay? We're going to add to that, but before I can add that, we've got to combine these first. So what is, I'm going to do this over to the side, okay? We have 11. We're going to have a fraction. We're going to get to that in just a minute. What's a common denominator? I'm adding these two together. Common denominator for 6 would be what? And 8. 6 and 8. What can they both go into? Now some people say, well, you could just multiply them together. Well, you could, but that gets a number much bigger than I want to deal with, personally. I would just say, well, they both go into 24. Why don't we just use that? 24, 24. I multiplied that by 4 to get it, so the top becomes 4. I multiplied this by 3 to get it, so I say 3 times 3 and I get 9. And remember, I'm adding, so I end up with 11 and what do I get? Is that 13? Yes. 13 24ths. Can the fraction be reduced any more than it is? Nope. Great. That's your final answer. Woohoo! All right, last one. Subtracting. Subtracting. The fun subtracting with mixed numbers. Okay, now this can get really, really tricky. So you can do a few ways. You can subtract the whole numbers from each other and then subtract the fractions from each other. The problem with that is sometimes that doesn't work out well. You might get one of them as a negative number, then one's a positive number, and then you've got to combine them in a weird way. And I really feel that it confuses people overall, okay? So the way I recommend, you don't have to use it this way, but this is my recommendation. If you will convert the mixed numbers to improper fractions, it works a whole lot easier, in my opinion. Now, there are times where maybe it'd be easier not to, but I think overall it's going to be easier to convert to improper. So that's what I do here. I'm just going to subtract. You don't have to. Your parents might watch this video and say, hey, there's another way, let me show you, and that's fine. I'm just showing you this way so that when we get to some more complicated fractions, you will see that it works out better on those complicated ones, okay? So I'm going to convert this to improper. So I say, what I do is I merry-go-round it, 2 times 5 plus the 1. So I end up with 11 right there, okay? And over here I say minus, and I got the 2 times that, but I got 5. Okay? Over 2. So I end up subtracting. And I end up getting 6 over 2. Now I need to convert this back to a mixed number, or a whole number in this case, because 6 over 2, when you convert it back, is going to equal 3. If you don't see how that equals 3, put a question mark by it and ask me in class. I'll explain more there, okay? But that is 3. Okay, next over here, once again, this is another example where I'm going to convert to improper, but I need to find a common denominator, okay? Find a common denominator, and you can do that first or second. Personally, I don't, either way, it doesn't really matter. I'm going to convert to improper and find a common denominator. So I'm going to convert and say 2 times that plus that, I get 13 over 2 minus, I get 11 over 5. Common denominator for both of these is 10, okay? So my new numbers are 10 and 10. I multiplied this by 2, so I have 22 on top. I multiplied this by 5, so I end up with 65. I subtract, so I have 10 still in my denominator. I end up with 43. And as I said, you do need to convert it back to a mixed number. In this case, you would have 4 3/10. Okay? 4 3/10. Not that difficult, but I feel like it does make all the difference. So please remember that.